Hello and welcome to the Big D Podcast. I am your host, contributor at fansided.com, Chris Halicke. And this is a really special episode because I'm having my very first guest host on the Big D Podcast. And as soon as I wanted to talk Mavs, this is the guy that I wanted to bring on. Basketball guru at 105.3 The Fan and avid lover of Lost, Nick Neppach. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing well, man. It's a good night, and basketball, my favorite part, I should say, of the basketball season is commencing because the finals are over and it's about to be free agency. And as much as I love the season, it's about to get even better.
Yes, it is. And this is the first summer in what feels like forever that the draft is not the main event for the Mavericks. It is free agency. It's exciting. Luka Doncic has got Rookie of the Year pretty much locked up. We're just going to make it official Monday night. It's going to be an exciting week and a half until free agency starts. So we're going to dive right in, Nick. We are going to want to hit up on the draft real quick. The draft is Thursday night. The Mavericks obviously don't have their first round pick because that was part of the deal to get Luka Doncic. And so they have the 37th overall pick. I've seen different things, different players, guys like Lewis King out of Oregon, Dylan Windler. Who are some guys that the Mavericks could possibly get, and what kind of contribution could they expect from any of these players?
Well, I think Jalen Brunson, at least for me, has really changed the perception of what we should expect for second-round players, and maybe he's not the norm, and he probably isn't the norm, but what he did show is that you can get a guy in the second round. For him, it was the 33rd pick, and he can come in and contribute at a pretty high level for you pretty quickly. And so if I'm the Mavericks and a Mavericks fan, I'm expecting to find a guy who can contribute in their rotation pretty quickly, like Jalen Brunson did. I mean, obviously, if they're going to be a contender like most people want them to be, it's not somebody making a huge contribution. But especially as the season goes on, you want somebody who's playing some decent minutes for you in your rotation. So with that in mind, you mentioned two of them. Dylan Windler, the Belmont senior, he led them to their first ever NCAA tournament win. He's going to be a wing guy that they could use that could be a 3-and-D type, somebody who can shoot, who can spot up, and that can also defend. And that is what I'm looking for when it comes to who's going to fit with Luka Doncic, because he can penetrate the defense and sort of get wherever he wants, but he's got to have shooters around him to maximize every area of his game. So I think Dylan Windler would be a fit. I think Lewis King would be a pretty good fit. His shot maybe needs a little work, but I think he's got all the right tools. He's a very good athlete. And a couple of, other names, I guess the pipe dream name, just to get him out of the way. I don't think he's going to be available in the second round. I think he goes in the first round, especially because of how good he was in the tournament. And that's Ty Jerome, the Virginia guard / forward, whatever he was. He was a ball handler a lot of the time. But, very, very smart player, showed a good shooting touch. And he, while he's not a super athlete, a very smart team defender. And that's something that you have to be able to do at Virginia. Plus the Virginia connection with Rick Carlisle never hurts. Two other names I would look for, Kai Bowman from Boston College, Naz Reid from LSU. I've seen his name tied to the Mavericks a little bit. I'm not sure about that one. I've seen mixed reports about where he might go. But those are just some names to look out for. And you can never forget the international game when it comes to the Mavericks. They're as tied in as anybody. I mean, obviously the greatest player in franchise history coming from Europe and maybe now the second greatest, depending on what Luka does the rest of his career. So they're tied into that like everybody else, maybe even more so. So if a name from overseas gets called, you can't be surprised. But I think the expectation for the 37th pick should not be just some name that maybe ends up in the G League and that we never really hear about. I think the Mavericks are past that, and they really have valued the draft, as they should. And so we should expect that they find someone who will be a rotation player here in their first year. Maybe after some bumps in the road, a couple of rough games, they'll learn the NBA and be able to contribute year one.
Yeah, I mean, you got a guy like Dorian Finney-Smith who was undrafted, and he's become a pretty good role player, somebody who I really like. And then what you can find early in the second round, I would love to be able to find like a 3-and-D wing or anybody who can shoot, because Luka will thrive with shooters around him, which is why, certain players in free agency are my pipe dream, but we'll get into that here in a little bit. But yeah, I really like the idea of bringing in a guy, and Jalen Brunson had such a good rookie year. It was a huge, not saying that I didn't expect him to do well. To do well as fast as he did took me for a bit of a surprise. He was just such a good player, such a good contributor, and it'd be really, really nice if they can get another guy to play a good role off the bench, especially to make them a little deeper, at that wing position.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would benefit them a lot. And with the addition of Kristaps Porzingis, and we'll get into this in the free agency talk, but they've kind of got two, even though we're moving towards positionless basketball, but two, of the mainstay type positions really filled. And when you look at their depth, that's they've got a lot of guards, and they've got Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber, if he comes back. But wing is somewhere with especially shooters that they've kind of been lacking. And so I think that's where I would like to see them go.
Yeah, one guy who I really kind of rooted for last year to do well and had like a decent game here and there was Ryan Broekhoff, because you had heard that he was such a good shooter in Australia. And so I'm thinking okay, I even thought that he could have been the next Peja Stojakovic, only not quite as good as Peja was, but that similar type of guy. You don't have to do much, just come in and get open and hit your open threes. That's pretty much all I want you to do. And maybe we get more of that from Broekhoff this year. But you have this great capability of getting a guy in the early second round who can play a similar role to that and maybe add some good defense as well. Because with Luka Doncic and Kristaps Porzingis, right now, unless they add a guy like Patrick Beverley in free agency or another really good defender, this team is going to struggle with defense. And so that would be something that I would like to see the Mavericks get possibly here in the draft.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there. I think that's an area they need to look.
All right, so to move on, the draft is all it's exciting and everything, but the big main event this summer is going to be free agency. I'm super stoked. Mavs fans should be stoked. There's still a lot of pessimistic Mavs fans out there saying oh, we're going to strike out on all these free agents and stuff like that, and we're going to end up piecing together from all these middle tier or bottom tier guys. This is not the same Mavericks going into free agency as we saw earlier this decade, when you had an aging Dirk Nowitzki, where you didn't have a good young core to build around. And having guys like Luka and Porzingis on this team is going to be attractive to some free agents. Probably more free agents than are actually going to be tied to the Mavericks. Which free agents do excite you about, if they're a really good fit for the Mavericks, or if there's a strong possibility that they come to the Mavericks?
Well, I for a while, and maybe not for a while, but the pipe dream, if you want to call it that, or the hope, the outside shot was Klay Thompson. And even though deep down, I probably never thought he was actually leaving Golden State. Well, now, even if he was going to or is going to, the injury changes that. And with Kevin Durant, obviously, that it changes that too. So obviously those guys, Kawhi Leonard, they're your hope and dream. But in reality, that's not going to happen. I guess it could. Nothing's impossible, but we're not counting on it. But with that said, especially for me, I've had to kind of give myself this mindset. The Mavericks kind of won their offseason in February or whatever it was exactly when they made the trade for KP. That was their big move. And anything else this offseason is icing on the cake. And I think that's what they're going to shoot for. They don't need, I guess I shouldn't say that. Any team could use another star player, but they don't need another star caliber player. I've heard a lot of people talking about this, and I think I agree. And I guess it's just the flavor of the month right now. But Toronto, the way they did it, and Milwaukee, if you're looking in the East as well, they've got a lot of really good role players. And even Houston, they've had Harden and CP3, but guys like PJ Tucker were invaluable to their roster. And so if the Mavericks are looking at how can we build this, well, you've got two stars, and hopefully KP is what he was. That's what they're banking on, and I think that's what everybody is saying that they're hoping is that he was. And obviously the Mavericks wouldn't have traded for him if they didn't think he would turn back into what he was in New York and how he was trending. But you've got Luka and you've got Kristaps. So now, well, let's add some quality depth around them and maybe guys that complement them really well. There's not positions in basketball, but everybody should have a role, especially your non-stars. So like, let's just look at the Warriors. Andre Iguodala is never going to be their top scorer, but man, he just provides invaluable leadership, and he can bring them offense when they need it. And so the Mavericks, I think they need, not saying that any player would be a perfect fit, but they need a defender. I mean, Luka is a smart player. He knows where to be, but he's not a lockdown defender. And Kristaps, he's not a bad rim protector, but he's not a rim protector in the sense that he's big and strong. So they need somebody who's going to be able to kind of lock down guys on the perimeter. So if you can get a defender who can also shoot, I think that'd be a great fit. But at the same time, if you can get Kemba Walker, well, why would you ever say no to that? And I don't know how likely a guy like that might be, but Kemba Walker seems to be the B-list, we'll call him, free agent. If it's not Kawhi, Kevin Durant, or Klay Thompson, well, Kemba is the next best thing. Mm-hmm. And I know that there are some that think he and Luka, the styles would clash, and maybe that's true. But if you get the chance to add a guy like that, I don't think you can pass it up. You're a team that has been in the lottery too often to be picky about your superstars of choice.
Yeah, it's not a time where we're going to complain about, oh man, the Mavericks got Kemba Walker. Come on,
right?
Seriously.
Now I will see. D'Angelo Russell. I don't know how I'd feel about that. Like, he's a good name and he had a great year, but I would be a little more eerie of that than Kemba Walker. I don't know why anyone would choose Russell over Walker, but maybe you can convince me. But if I'm the Mavericks, I'm okay with the big fish kind of doing whatever they want, and then let's go see if we can get somebody on that's the secondary choice that might feel underappreciated where they are, and because of somebody else their team added, or because they didn't get the offer they might hope for. I think somebody that I have really convinced myself I'd love to see in Dallas is Malcolm Brogdon.
Dude, yes.
He is restricted, so we saw that Clint Capella was restricted back when he went through this. Chandler Parsons, the Mavericks got out on the winning end of that. I guess maybe the losing end, depending on how you feel about Chandler Parsons. But Malcolm Brogdon is a guy, what do you shoot? Like 43% from three, a great free throw shooter, and a good defender. Like, sign me up for a guy like that.
Absolutely.
Who knows?
Dude, yes.
I don't know if the Bucks are going to, I guess they could pay everybody, but are they going to pay everybody? A team that is one of the favorites in Vegas right now for the finals next season. So there's a lot that needs to happen before the Mavericks, I think, really get moving. Like, they're not going to be one of the first dominoes to fall. I think they're going to let people make their moves and then hop in at the right time and add somebody that's going to help their roster. But if you asked me today who's your top choice, it might be Malcolm Brogdon. But if we're looking at like star type free agents, Kemba Walker, you're going to score a lot of points with that guy, win a lot of basketball games. So I'm not saying no to that.
To go back to your whole D'Angelo Russell versus Kemba, I actually would prefer D'Angelo over Kemba. It's not like it's like a landslide or anything, but Russell would be cheaper, and he's younger, and I like his size better. And I know length and size isn't everything in basketball, but it's attractive. I just think that as long as either one, whether it be D'Angelo or Kemba, because they both are kind of traditional point guards, they as long as they are fine with playing off the ball, because that was the big thing between Luka and Dennis was that it wasn't going to work because Dennis was going to play better with the ball in his hand, and Luka can play off the ball a little bit, but Luka is going to thrive with the ball in his hands too. So you need to be able to have a guy who can come in and be able to play off the ball and thrive off of that, and be able to, because Carlisle, Rick Carlisle likes to have, multiple ball handlers on the floor at the same time. So both Kemba and D'Angelo are both attractive in that, but Russell would be about like $5 million a year cheaper, and he's significantly younger than Kemba. So
Yeah, that's. I mean, the age factor. I mean, that definitely applies.
yeah, I dude. As soon as you brought up Malcolm Brogdon, I'm like, I think you would have to offer a pretty decent sized contract. You might have to really overpay for him because Milwaukee will try to bring him back, obviously. But you're going to want to have to offer a contract that's going to make Milwaukee just be like, I'm sorry, we just can't match that.
Yeah.
Whether that be like in a 12 to 15 million a year range. I don't know if that's like, oh my gosh, like ridiculous. Like, how can we pay him that much? But if you really want a guy who you really think can fit in the system and make the system better, a guy like Malcolm Brogdon, I mean, he hits all the checkpoints.
Yeah, and you might, have to overpay a guy, but it's sort of sports 101. Like, if you got to overpay free agents almost always. That's how it works. And
Yeah.
so if you want somebody that's really going to help you, you're going to have to pay a lot. And if the Mavericks think he's worth it, well, then I don't have any issue with it because they have a lot more basketball knowledge than I do. Even though I feel like a lot of the time I have good ideas, I'm going to trust them on it. So if they want to pay him, great. I think he'd be a good fit. But Mavs Twitter, I would probably be pretty upset with the dollar signs.
Yeah, it's gonna be there's gonna be a lot of money spent, and there is going to be at least one free agent. I will make a prediction. There is going to be at least one free agent that the Mavericks signed that fans are going to be upset at how much they paid him. Obviously, the last player was Wes Matthews. I don't even want to go down that road with how much money he made when it came to his contributions to the team. Yeah, but to go back to like your pipe dream situation, like Klay Thompson was also my big pipe dream. Like it was like the epitome of like if the Mavericks got him, I was gonna be like hype train. Like this team is a finals contender. They might not actually be that, but Klay is just he's such a good shooter. He's such a good defender. He would be such a great fit. And then you throw that in with having to defend Klay, with at the same time having to try to defend Luka and KP with the pick and roll, the pick and pop, and oh, dude, it's just it would be so exciting. It's not gonna happen. It's just nice to dream about it every now and then.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's always fun to daydream a little bit.
Oh yeah. So two guys that are being talked about quite a bit. Well, one guy's being talked about quite a bit. The other guy, there was just some news today about him opting out, and that was Al Horford in Boston. And I think that's an interesting fit. And then the other guy who's being talked about a lot just because of his ties to Dallas already is Julius Randle. What are your thoughts on Julius Randle? Because there seems to be like a love it or hate it when it comes to Randle's fit in Dallas.
I just talked about lack of positions and those kinds of things, and you fill a role. Well, the role Julius Randle would fill is he's just insanely productive. And I don't know if I love him in like the modern NBA, but the dude just scores points and gets rebounds. And like he doesn't really shoot, and he looks kind of small down there, but man, he just puts up numbers. And for that, I wouldn't be upset if the Mavericks signed him. It probably would cost more than I would want for a guy like that because the things I value are different than what the things Julius Randle brings to the NBA. But I mean, he's a great player. I mean, I just pulled up his numbers: 21 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 3 assists a game, and he shot 52% from the field. So he puts up good numbers. He's a 73% free throw shooter, and he is from here. I think he would probably like to play here. I think the fan base would really respond well to him just because he is from here. I think there would be a divide, like you said, but the majority, I think, would be excited because he puts up numbers. Now, the fit might be a little awkward, but Rick Carlisle would make it work. I would like to see him do that. I'd be interested to watch how he kind of moved the pieces and made it all kind of slide together like a puzzle to fit a guy like that in. He's probably going to want some money. Is it going to be more than I would be willing to pay? Well, yeah, probably, but I'm also cheap. So, like, don't take my advice. I was before he signed with the Pelicans, I was pretty out on Julius Randle in Dallas, and I've kind of warmed up to him since then. I've kind of changed my tone. Not that he's my first choice, but I think I'd be excited to see him play here and how he worked with a guy like Luka Doncic, because I think Luka changes everything. He could fit with just about anybody. There's certain types of players that would maximize what he does, but I think he's a good enough player and a smart enough player that he could really make anybody work within his style.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The thing that Randall, there's two things about Randall that really excite me if he were to come to the Mavericks. The first off is that dude's motor is like nonstop. He is he's an animal on the court. And I love watching players like that. I love watching. That was like the one thing about Wes Matthews that I just liked, is that he was always, if anything, he needed to dial it back, because when he get really excited, he just would start chucking up threes. But with Randall, even though he's undersized, he's always competing with the guys in the paint. He's a tenacious rebounder. I think that would bring a lot of emotion, a lot of passion to the team that is much needed, and it would definitely give this team a bit of a swagger. To me, like, if I would rather have, like, if I had the choice of, like, do I take Kemba Walker or do I take Julius Randle and Patrick Beverley? Like, for me, I almost would rather lean towards Julius Randle and Patrick Beverley, just because of what they would bring to the team in terms of production, in terms of defense, in terms of just overall not being. The Dallas Mavericks would become much, much more difficult to play against if you added two guys like that. And Kemba Walker, to me, Kemba Walker would add almost nothing in terms of defense. And that would be, to me, you're paying a guy $32 million a year to score and then not be able to defend, and you're relying on Porzingis and Luka to be your best rebounders, and that's just not efficient, or it leaves lack of production, to say the least.
Yeah, I think no matter who you sign, it's gonna leave something somewhere to be desired, but you have to weigh, what do you value, and the Mavericks have to do the same. What do they value most in these free agents that they're going to have to go after? Because outside of, well, I guess really no one, any player you sign is going to have a flaw. And so how can you maximize what they're good at and minimize what they struggle with and fit that to your roster? And that's why they make a lot of money, but they're certainly going to have to go through all of those things. And like you mentioned at the very top, this is the first year in quite a while where the draft is not the centerpiece, and it makes all of this so much more exciting, because while I don't think they're going to get some huge free agent, I think for the first time in a while, they're a very appealing place basketball-wise for a free agent to come, especially if a guy is younger and still has quite a bit left in his career and he wants to build with other young players. Luka and KP doesn't get better than that.
So two things to kind of add on to that. Julius Randle, if you've seen his Instagram lately, got a new tattoo. It's got a gigantic sign of for Interstate 30, and it's got like the City of Dallas logo, like the D with the lines in it. And so that's like a brand new tattoo. So he's obviously still very proud of where he's from. And then there was news, I think it was today, that came out. And today is Tuesday that we're recording this podcast. Today that it came out that Patrick Beverley will meet with the Mavericks for sure. That the Mavericks will be one of the teams that Beverley meets with. So that's exciting, to know that at least the Mavericks are going to get their opportunity to pitch themselves to Beverley. And even though he's not the sexiest pick in terms of who you can get in free agency, I'd be over the moon if they got Patrick Beverley. I'd like to see them pair it with another guy, like a Julius Randle, or if they can bring in another, guy who you can pay between 15 and 20 million a year. But Beverly, to me, the defense is still so important to me. I know it's such a scoring league and it's such a soft league, compared to what it used to be, back in the 90s, for all old school basketball fans out there. But it's just so nice to bring in a guy who can play defense and can still contribute offensively. He's not like a scoring machine, obviously, but he can still contribute.
And his tenacity and toughness and never back downness, if I can put it that way, just goes to what you were talking about earlier. And I think having him with a young guy like Luka, nobody's going to punk Luka because Patrick Beverley's on the floor and he's going to punk them. And he's just the kind of guy, he's passionate. He plays with energy every night. I think the fan base would love him. He probably wants to get paid. He hasn't made a ton in the comparison to the rest of the league throughout his career, so he's probably looking for a big check. But he is a name that I would not be disappointed at all if he ended up in a Mavericks uniform.
Absolutely not. Well, I don't think. Well, okay, here, just real quick to cap it off. Let's make our prediction for who you think the Mavericks will bring in. It doesn't have to be like exactly how they spend their around 30 million, but just who are you the most confident that the Mavericks would bring in free agency?
Today, gosh, it's so tough. I think Kemba stays with the Hornets, so I'm not going to say him. D'Angelo Russell, I don't know I guess it depends on if Kyrie ends up in Brooklyn, so that's tough. It's so hard to put a name on it. I'm going to say, I don't know. I can't put a name on who I think of the guys we talked about here. I'll put it this way. Of the guys that we talked about, let's just say Randall, Walker, Beverly, and Russell, D'Angelo Russell. I'm going to say Patrick Beverly, just to pick from that group of some of the main ones we talked about, leaving out Brogdon because he's restricted.
I think I'm leaning, out of the names we've mentioned today, I think Beverly probably is the best chance. I think Randall, if the Mavericks became more interested in Randall, because I get the sense that the Mavericks aren't that interested in bringing Julius Randle in, I think the Mavericks are going to go after, some of the bigger guys first, and then if Randall's still there, then they'll take a serious look at him. I don't think that he's near the top of their list. And going at it that way, he just might not be there. Another team might have already signed him by that point. So I think Beverly probably is, I would agree with you. Beverly is like the highest chance, at least just taking into the fact that they will get the chance to actually meet with him. If I had to make a prediction, I'm going to say, I don't know. Maybe they do convince, because I think from what I've heard, I've heard Kyrie Irving is going to Brooklyn. You keep hearing these things about the Lakers getting a third max guy, and that Kyrie could be one of them. I still think Kyrie goes to Brooklyn, and because of that, I'm gonna predict that the Mavericks sign D'Angelo Russell to a max contract.
All right.
I don't know how confident I am in that.
That's the prediction I liked. That is a prediction. Mine was weak compared to that. I like that.
I mean, it's just Mark Cuban is, he loves. I mean, dude, he's been on how many TV shows in his, in his life. I mean, he loves the theatrics, and to be able to, if they could bring in a big name, I think that would be good. And I think D'Angelo Russell would catapult them into an almost for sure playoff spot. The West is going to be so deep. There's going to be so many teams. There's going to be multiple teams that should make the playoffs that aren't going to make the playoffs just because
Right.
The West is way too deep and only 8 teams can go. So, yeah, I'll say that's my prediction. We'll see if I'm right. I'm not very confident. Usually my predictions are really bad. But...
But like the saying goes, go big or go home, right?
Oh, yeah. But if I'm right, then I can come on here and brag. So
There you go.
all right. So to close up the episode today, I'm gonna do the walk off like I usually do. Last episode we were talking about women's soccer, and I just went on more of a soccer rant and how it should be more popular in America. This time we are gonna completely veer away from sports and talk about something that Nick and I both have a strong affinity for, and that is the amazing television series Lost. And if you haven't watched Lost, my God, you need to watch it. But there probably will be spoilers in this conversation. So maybe stop it right now and then go watch it. And then you can pick this up, after you've watched all 6 seasons. So, Nick, what is your reasoning, like the biggest reason why you got into and love Lost?
So I actually did not watch Lost for a long time after it aired. In fact, I've seen the whole series twice now, but the first time I watched it was only maybe 5 years ago. Maybe a little less than that. But I had just always heard how good it was, and I was like really late to like the Netflix like streaming party, and so I used Netflix, and I had 3 or 4 roommates, and I was the only one that worked like at night, and so I was home all day by myself, typically like Monday through Friday, and so I just decided, well, everyone's always talked about this show. The only thing I know is that it's about a plane crash, so let's pick it up. And the first watch through of Lost, and I had friends that talked about it, but I watched the whole thing in 3 months. I think it was like 122 episodes. And so I picked it up out of nowhere because I had heard good things about it and just loved it. And then when my wife and I met, when we were dating, we watched through it, and in fact into our engagement and early into our marriage, and it took us to finish it. But so I've watched it twice, kind of just picked it up on a whim, and I can confidently say it's one of my top 3 favorite shows of all time, maybe number 1. I kind of go back and forth.
I just love the fact that every time I'm on Twitter and I click on your profile, your header is the 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. Like every time, like it's not like I'm like a creeper like on your profile all the time, but I'm just saying, like anytime I click on it, I'm like, oh yeah, Lost. I need to watch that again.
and so many people ask me, or at least when I first did it, and it's the same for even my personal Facebook page, but like so many people ask me, like, what is that? And I'm just blown away that people don't know what it is. Like it kind of drives me crazy. Because to me, it's so iconic. And if you've seen any of Lost, you would know. But I'm always surprised how many people, don't know what it is. But yeah, it's a great show. Just, I'd say this to people all the time. The first 3 seasons of Lost, and I really believe this, are the best television that's ever been made. I think they shaped the way modern TV is presented, and like with all of the twists and the way episodes worked and the flashbacks and all that. Mm-hmm. I think the first 3 seasons of Lost like really shaped modern TV and changed the game for modern TV.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I didn't get into Lost until in between the 5th and 6th season, like when they aired. My wife got into Lost whenever she was in active duty Navy, and she was actually like, she was going through some health stuff, and she was kind of like left behind, and so she just got like the first season on DVD and just ended up watching it and got hooked. And so she got into it, and then whenever she moved back home and we started dating, and she was like, you need to get into Lost. And I had always heard about it because it was like in like the mid 2000s. It was like what Game of Thrones is now, or what Breaking Bad was when Breaking Bad was the rage, mm-hmm. and when Walking Dead was the rage. Like that, Lost was the show. And if you weren't watching Lost, you weren't with it. And I wasn't with it. And so she was just like, here's the first season, just watch it. I watched the first season. I swear it was probably 2 weeks. Like I blew through the first season. I ended up watching the first 5 seasons on DVD in about a month and a half. maybe like between a month and a half and 2 months. And I wanted to hurry up and watch it because the sixth season was about to start, and I knew that that it was going to be the last season. That it announced it was going to be the last season, and I wanted to be able to start right when it started, so that we could watch it all the way through. And so I'm the same way. I've watched through the series. My wife and I have watched through the series at least 3 times, maybe 4. It's so good. So I'm pretty sure we feel the same on this, because the biggest thing that people talk about with Lost, the one big thing they talk about is how like the pilot was like one of the best episodes of TV ever made.
Yes.
And then so everybody talks about the pilot, and then everybody talks about the end. And there's such a controversy about the end. What is your stance on how Lost ended? Did you love it or did you hate it? Because there's like only 2 stances.
Yeah, so first of all, and in case people don't want spoilers, this will have to be a spoiler. Even the first time I watched it, before I kind of knew anything about it, I never, and I don't know if you were like this, but I never assumed that people were just dead the whole time.
I did not either. Nope.
So going into the finale, like I was, when they're all in the church, that crossed my mind for a moment, like, oh, they were all dead. But then I kind of got on Reddit and got on Google and kind of looked around, and the idea is that, or at least from what I've gathered, is that they all had something to like let go of, and they all really did die when they died in the show, and this was all of them like, okay, they went to the island for a reason, to let go of these things, and that was that. I thought the ending, I felt I was a little underwhelmed, but I didn't hate it. I liked kind of like the peacefulness of the ending, if that makes sense. I felt satisfied, I think is the word for it. I wasn't, excited and pumped up, but at the end of it, I was just satisfied. I really enjoyed it, especially the second time. The second time I watched it, I appreciated it even more.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was the perfect way to end the show. When the 6th season first started, and they were doing the flash sideways, and they had like the 2 parallel storylines. At first, like in the very first, like in the season premiere, I was really confused. I'm like, okay, so what's going on? Like, did it work? Like what they tried to do, did it work? And then once Desmond was on the plane, I'm like, this isn't the same. And I'm like, this is not the same storyline. Like, there's no way that what's going on, as if the plane never crashed and they land in LA, is what we thought it would be, or what they thought it would be, or what fans think it was. That it was something else that we were experiencing that we weren't going to find out until the end of this show. And that's exactly what happened, is that you began to figure out that it was like some sort of purgatory, that they had to find each other and then move on altogether. And I thought the way they did it was awesome. The last 2 or 3 episodes, like, dude, when Sun and Jin died, it was like,
oh gosh,
oh my lord, it was and the thing is that Sun and Jin were like, I always liked Jin, but Sun always got on my nerves a little bit. But even then, because Jin loved her so much, and just when they died together, it was, oh man, it was hard to watch.
Oh yeah, emotional for sure.
Yes. So I don't really know what, I mean, I could talk about Lost for forever. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up about it, that like any reason why people should get into it if they haven't already?
I think one, it will fill your time. I mean, there's a lot of episodes, so if you're looking for like man, I can't find anything to watch, you're one of those people that likes catch an episode at night before you go to bed, or just like wind down with an episode of a series. A perfect thing for that, because there's a lot of it and you won't run out for a while. But also, I think it's just, if you're very into Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, like the shows that have been very popular since Lost, I think watching Lost will give you a bigger appreciation for what TV is now. Because Lost, and I wish so badly I would have watched it live to experience the cliffhangers week to week. and then even more so like season to season, because like the what and help me refresh my memory here. The very end of season one, the last scene is where they find the hatch, correct?
Yes, yeah. It's
And
like
and
it's like
so
the camera peered down into the hatch, and you just see like Jack and Locke like looking down into it, and then it just cuts out, and you're just like, "What?"
yeah, and then you have to wait an entire year to figure out what happens. And then in the episode one of season two is Desmond in the hatch, correct?
Yes.
And so at that point, like the very first scene is some guy you've never seen before in some place you've never seen before, and you're like, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
And then and like it all connects, and that's just amazing to me. I wish I could have seen that just week to week and year to year as it was happening, but the transitions from episode to episode, from season to season, especially early on, are very good. I tell people all the time, seasons, are there 7 seasons or six?
So there's 6 seasons.
So seasons 4 and 5, especially season 5. I tell people season 5 is not that great.
No, I was actually just going to ask, like, what was your least favorite part or season of the show, and you just answered it for me.
And then, like, because they had the writers' strike or something like that in the middle of season 4, and so you can really tell the turn that it takes, like halfway through season 4, of how different the show gets. And so the first 3.5 seasons are just phenomenal, and then half of season 4, season 5 are fine, they're good. And then I thought season 6, I thought they wrapped it up really well. I really enjoyed it. I think the characters are very easy to relate to. So if you're that kind of person, you like really character development. They develop every character very well. There's a lot of details, a lot of stories for each character. So there's a lot to like about Lost. And it would just, I think, give you some nostalgia because it's each year it's an older and older show. So it'll give you something you can think back and like how popular this was when it aired. So I think it's a phenomenal show, and there are many reasons why people should watch it if they haven't already, or just go back and watch it. I've only watched it twice, but watching it multiple times, it's still really good.
Yeah, it really, like every time we've watched it, when my wife and I have watched it, when we started over and we keep watching it, it's just as interesting as it was the first. Well, maybe not the first time, but the obviously because you know what's going to happen. But every time we've watched it after the first time, it still hooks you. It still like pulls you into every episode, and even the episodes that end with those cliffhangers. Where I remember the first time I was watching an episode, and it was already like 1 or 1:30 in the morning, and I had to get up at like 6 in the morning for work. And it was the episode where Jack was doing the surgery on Ben, and he cuts something in Ben, and he's got to like stop, and he's like telling Kate like, get to this area and then tell me the story that you that I told you on the day that we crashed on the island. And he's just like, Kate, damn it, run! And like it just cuts off. I'm like, dude, I can't go to bed with that. Like, come on. I've got no son. I'm going to have to be up for another 42, 43 minutes to watch the next episode. It still pulls you in, and it's so awesome. The 5th season there were some aspects of the 5th season that I loved being able to go back and see the Dharma Initiative and see just all the different aspects of that. And yeah, the time travel thing was a little strange, and it was almost like they were trying to waste time with writing. Like they just ran out of ideas. But it was really cool to see how they tied so many things together. How Faraday ends up becoming like one of the most important scientists for the Dharma Initiative and everything like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about Lost, but overall, awesome show. I've tried to convince my wife on more than one occasion that we need to buy the whole box set.
We haven't.
I haven't convinced her yet, but I will not give up.
Yeah, we don't have the box set, but we do have all 6 seasons that were all. I mean, these are the ones that my wife bought whenever she was in Bahrain, when she was active duty Navy, and she was in Bahrain and was left behind because of health issues. And so like that first season that she bought is like the one that she bought like back in like 2005 or something like that. So but we have all the DVD set, and I think it's definitely no longer on Netflix, but I think it's still on Hulu. So if you do have
Yeah.
Hulu, it's on there.
Yeah, they took it off Netflix, but the last time I was watching, or when we finished the series, was on Hulu.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, thanks, Nick, for coming on. I had a blast talking some basketball, talking some Lost. We are going to be doing some more episodes. We're going to be talking some Texas Rangers here coming up pretty soon. We're going to be talking some Dallas Cowboys as training camp comes up soon. And once free agency kicks underway, I might ask Nick to come on again to talk some more Mavericks. So thanks, Nick, for coming on, dude. It was so much fun.
absolutely, man. Anytime.
All right, guys. Catch you on the flippity flip.